Hey everybody, my name's Nate Moore, and I'm thrilled to be here today to talk about Islands architecture, Astro, and you. It is such an honor to share the virtual stage with such an incredible lineup of people, and I'm really excited to introduce you to Astro. It's a new tool for building faster websites. Astro 1.0 launched a few weeks ago, but it's been well over a year of work behind the scenes to get everything ready for this moment. There is an incredible team behind Astro of maintainers and core maintainers, and I really encourage you to check out our community. I'm super excited to show off what we've been working on and chat about Islands architecture. It's a really interesting way to solve performance bottlenecks that come up with the current crop of frameworks. And overall, I think Astro is a really fun, approachable way to build websites that you're going to love. So a typical website looks something like this, and you can see we've kind of broken things down into components. That's really the way that most developers work these days. And a lot of these components are interactive, but most of them are actually static. So there are some pieces that require client-side JavaScript, but in my mind, most of these don't need client-side JavaScript. With a traditional approach, where everything is kind of one JavaScript monolith, you might render this on the server side and then also hydrate it on the client. It's a nice developer experience where the code is isomorphic and you're only writing things once, but it's running in two places. And you end up with hundreds of kilobytes of JavaScript, some of which runs on the server, and then it also runs on the client, even for non-interactive pieces that really don't need any JavaScript on the client. So with Astro, we're using a technique called Islands architecture, and you may have also heard the term partial hydration. So it's a very similar component-based experience, even using the same frameworks that you already know and love, but interactive pieces of the site are broken down into what we call islands. So islands are basically tiny applications inside of your static content. And in Astro, islands are recursive, and the children of islands are actually not part of your JavaScript bundle, but are embedded in the HTML. What this amounts to is up to a 90% reduction in JavaScript overall. So building great websites, that's what we're all here for. And it gets easier every year, but in my mind, choosing the right tool has never been more difficult. You can build a static site with a static site generator like Hugo or Levendy, but then you're really hand-rolling your own client-side JavaScript. You can build a traditional single-page application, but that comes with a lot of downsides, like poor SEO and performance. You can mitigate some of that with the Jamstack pattern, where you're rendering on the server and then enhancing it as a single-page application on the client. Or you can fully lean into the server and render your pages at request time. All these come with really interesting trade-offs. So static sites are designed for speed on the client, but like I mentioned, you're hand-rolling your own JavaScript and maybe even setting up a build pipeline. It's pretty difficult to work with sometimes. And spas are designed for interactivity. They are not good for SEO or performance, but for long sessions, they can be really great. Jamstack makes it really easy to work with content, but we're prioritizing our own developer experience over the client-side performance. And with server-side rendered applications, they scale, but with scale comes its own set of problems. So this is why we built Astro. It's the web framework designed for everybody. It strikes a really good balance between all the trade-offs the last generation of tools made. But it's also really approachable for newcomers, and there are still powerful features for advanced users to take advantage of. In my mind, it's the modern developer experience with the way we should have been building websites this whole time. So Astro has been designed for speed from the ground up. We have a performance obsession. We really use the islands architecture approach to extract your user interface into small isolated components. So instead of rendering everything on the server, sending it to the client, and hydrating again, we are only sending the interactive parts to the client. The end result is that unused JavaScript never ends up in the client, and your site loads faster. You'll have a faster time to interactive and much better lighthouse metrics. We do this using what we call hydration directives. So this is really lazy loading as a core feature of the framework, and it's not something you have to think about or write code in a special way to take advantage of. We have client load, which is a high priority and loads a component immediately. We have client idle, which is a medium priority, and will preload your component as soon as pending work is done. And then we have client visible, which is really fun, and this will load your component only when it comes in and is actually visible on screen. Astro was designed for content, so content is really the foundation of the web. We make building static sites fun and easy. We support pages in HTML, Markdown, MDX. We have really similar file system routing to Next.js, and we make it so easy with built-in fetch support to call any CMS or endpoint using a familiar web API. We also built Astro with interactivity in mind. So you shouldn't have to choose your meta framework based on the framework that you like to use. With Astro, we are framework agnostic. So you can use your favorite, or you can pick a different one and put it on every different page. You can use the tools you already love, and we integrate really well with Tailwind, PostCSS, Sass, all of the things that the Vite ecosystem expects. Astro is not just a static site generator. We really designed it to scale. So you can go from static sites that are rendered at build time and switch into server mode where you're rendering on request. With Astro Add, you're only one command away from deploying to Netlify, Vercel, Cloudflare, Deno, and even more. All right, that was a great intro and some background on Astro, but now I want to build something together. So let's scaffold out our Astro project using our create Astro CLI. All you have to do is run pnpm create Astro. And let's create a folder named ViteConf. And I'm going to start with an empty project and we can walk through it together. And we will install dependency, but not create a Git repo. And it asks us how we want to set up TypeScript, which is cool because Astro is actually TypeScript by default, so there's never any setup that you have to do. In this case, I'm going to go with strict, and we get some instructions on how to continue. So let's take a look at the files that got generated. We have a public directory, and this is where any static assets that Astro is not going to touch will go. These will just be copied over to the final build. We have a source pages directory, which is where our file-based routing kicks in. And then we have an Astro config file. What's cool about this is you probably don't need to open this file. We have a command line tool that will edit your config for you. But if we look at the index.astro page, it looks a lot like HTML. And that's because Astro has a special syntax that is a superset of HTML. So .astro, anything you can do in HTML, you can do here. But obviously we built our own syntax for a reason. We wanted something that was a really great mix of HTML for beginners and something that had the power of JSX-like expressions for experts. So before we get started, I'm just going to drop a style sheet into our public directory, and then we can just use a regular link tag. main.css. And that's looking a little bit better. One of the most powerful things you can use in Astro is what we refer to as front matter. So this area up here is any server-side JavaScript that is going to set up your template. So we can use things like top level await and fetch and call any API that we might have. And then we can use a JSX-like expression to map over all our speakers. And I'm just going to put the speaker name on the page. And you can see everybody that is speaking today. But one other thing we can do in an Astro file is use scope styles. So every style in an Astro file is going to be scoped to that file by default. So if I add some CSS here, this will actually just be scoped. So this is not going to bleed out of the file at all. Another thing we can do, I mentioned that component-based workflow. So we can extract this to a components directory, which isn't special, it's just convention. But I'm going to call this title. And I'll just move my H1 over and my styles. So now up here, we can import our title component and then render it like any other component. So I think it would be cool to extract these speakers to their own component. So let's make a speaker card. And we're going to set up some stuff in the front matter. So we're going to grab the name, at least, out of our Astro props. And to type these, all we have to do is write an interface called props. So this will have a name, which is a string, and projects, which is an array of strings. So if we jump back here and import our speaker card, we can replace this with a component that just passes in the speaker as props. Now we have this awesome list of everybody speaking today, and I'm actually realizing I forgot to wrap this in an unordered list. So I'm gonna do that, and our styling gets a little better. I also want to clean up our styles a little bit.
A little longer than a few minutes later.
So this looks a lot better and hopefully gives you a good sense of just how easy it is to work with data and pipe it into some markup with styles in Astro. Now, I think this is a secret superpower of Astro that you can get really far without ever touching client-side JavaScript, but I did promise to talk on Islands architecture, so let's do that now. So Astro actually brings the Islands architecture pattern to every framework. And all you have to do is add pnpm run astro add, the framework of your choice. In this case, I'm going to choose Preact because I've really liked Preact signals lately. So I'm going to write astro add Preact. And this will install our dependencies that we need. And it will also ask us if we want to update our config file, which we do. And that's all there is to it. We can get started and add a Preact component. And we're just going to export a button that accepts some children. But that's not very interesting unless it does something when we click it. So we're going to create a store file. And this will use the new Preact signals, which are very cool. And we'll export a signal called menu that starts out closed. And we're also going to export a toggle. So this will switch the value of menu to open or closed. And then it's also going to log that we've toggled something with the current state. And now if we go back to our button component, we can import toggle and set this to be the click handler. And back in this file, we'll import our button. We can use it like any other component, except that you can see we have these hydration directives here. So each of these opts our component into sending JavaScript to the client. This is really nice because you have granular control over what actually ends up in the client. I'm actually gonna just say menu here. And we've got it. So if we check our console, we should be able to see that this log toggle a bunch. So that toggle is working, and now we can hook it up to a menu. So I'm going to create a menu component, imports both the menu and toggle, and also takes some children. And this is interesting. So we're going to render differently based on the state of the menu. So if menu.value is closed, we're going to return nothing. Otherwise, we're going to return an aside. And if we click on this, we're going to toggle. So this will be the backdrop. And this will be the main content. And here we'll stop propagation so that the toggle doesn't get triggered. Hey everybody, my name's Nate Moore. So let's render that menu component here and make sure to hydrate it. And this can take an array of 5 items. And the second argument here is actually a map function that takes a map callback. So we can just return li with page i+1, and we'll wrap it in a list. And now when we click this, a flyout menu should come from the left, which it totally does. So this is an island, and this button is an island, and they are communicating through a shared signal. Everything and that is static is going to stay in your Astro file, and everything that's dynamic or requires a bit of logic is going to be in your JSX files, and you're explicitly opting in to sending that JavaScript to the browser. So you can kind of think of islands like donuts. There's an outer ring that has some interactivity, but everything inside of it is actually revived from the client-side HTML. So this means your JavaScript bundles are really, really small. And there's one other cool thing we can do. We can actually pass in slots from Astro to our components. And the way we do that is just like you would in any other Astro file. We're going to have a fragment here that's called title. And now that we have a slot that is a child of a component, we receive the title as a prop here. And then I'm just going to create a header. We'll call it nav. And we'll use that title, and then just a close button that will toggle. So now when we click on the menu, we should get a title and a close button and all our pages. And clicking here does nothing. Clicking outside or clicking the close button totally works. To wrap up, I thought it'd be really interesting to look at what's going on behind the scenes here. So how is this actually working? And we have to look at our HTML for that. So there's a style and a script that we're injecting. This is the entire Astro runtime. It's really tiny. And we have these Astro Island custom elements. So these are basically loading some chunks of JavaScript with a specific export and a renderer, which basically coordinates how something is rehydrated on the client. And we have some props and the hydration method. And then inside of this, we have nothing. But if I disable JavaScript, so we have some template elements here because our component didn't render anything, but we knew that we have to pass in some slotted content when we do render something. So these correspond to the slotted content. So our title is just going to be the text, and the default slot is our list. And these will be cleaned up when JavaScript starts, but they'll be held in memory. And before hydration can continue, they are essentially passed back to the framework to act as children. And same thing here, but a little different. So we have the Astro slot element. The Astro slot element tells us that everything below this element should be treated as static. And this is what allows us to nest islands within islands and also mix frameworks with each other. Finally, I just wanted to share my favorite Astro feature, which is our awesome community. We have a thriving Discord community with tons of creative people and lots of people willing to help out. So if you liked what you saw today, definitely come check us out at astro.build/chat. Thank you so much for having me. My name's Nate Moore. You can follow me on Twitter, n_more. And I just got to say, we are so happy with our decision to be part of the Vite ecosystem. It is really the best place to be. So thank you again. Please check out Astro, astro.build.